As a pickup enthusiast, I've always had this question in the back of my mind. How many trucks that ended up failing were actually this close to being game changers? So in this video, we're diving into a bunch of cars that had serious potential to be huge, but just couldn't stick the landing. Stick around because at the end, I've got a surprise car for you. The 2000s had some crazy vehicles in America, but nothing quite like the Ford Explorer Sport Trac. It had the heart of an SUV, but a truck bed out back. So what made it special? And why did it disappear just as quickly as it arrived? To find out, we need to go back to 2000, where exciting developments were happening over at Ford. Ford's executives were wondering how to create an entirely new vehicle category to shake things up, and they would soon find the perfect idea. They wanted to create something called a sport utility truck. But what exactly was the point? They were already making the F-150, which was a heavy-duty workhorse. They also had the Ranger, which was the practical no-frills option. So where did the Sport Trac fit in? Right in between. Bigger and more comfortable than the Ranger, but smaller and smoother riding than the F-150. It was for people who needed a truck but didn't want to drive one. So Ford made a commitment to bring this idea to life. But the ballsy moves at Ford were only just getting started. They had the idea to derive this truck from the Ford Explorer. The Explorer was their SUV series, and Ford wanted a new creation to share that same UN-105 platform. This concept was actually revolutionary for its time. Folks now had the opportunity to drive something with the comfort of an SUV, but the utility of a pickup. One of the first true crossover vehicles. But then a new problem emerged for Ford. You see, the F-150 was clearly a best-selling pickup truck. So if Ford marketed this wrong, they could cannibalize sales from the more profitable full-size truck. So Ford made a fateful decision. They marketed the Sport Trac as part of the Explorer SUV family rather than a standalone pickup. So how did it sell? Well, before we get to that, we need to dive deeper into the Sport Trac itself. Because folks, this wasn't just a cut and paste job. No, Ford actually stretched the frame of the Explorer by over 14 inches. This made it 40% stiffer laterally than a standard Explorer, giving it the handling of a true utility vehicle. Confident, planted, and ready, and to match that muscle, they gave it a brand new look. The Sport Trac had a power dome hood and a bald two-tone fascia. Then you had roof rails on the top, which were rated for 100 pounds when crossbars were added. But the real surprise waited out back, because Ford gave the Sport Trac something no one else had. The first all-composite cargo box, 50 inches long, all made of molded plastic. This made sure it wouldn't rust and would be difficult to dent. But the innovation didn't stop there. The available tonneau cover could fold from the front or rear, keeping your gear dry and secure. You also had a stainless cargo cage doubled as a bed extender, adding nearly 2 extra feet when the tailgate was down. But cargo space wasn't the only thing Ford was rethinking. Step inside and the first thing you'll notice is the hosable rubber flooring. See, this vehicle wasn't about luxury. It was meant for mud, dogs, boots, and fun. And up front, 6-way power adjustment for comfort on long road trips. But then, Ford added something no one saw coming. It had a button. Tap it and the rear glass dropped down automatically. Why was this so important? Imagine hauling fishing rods or your favorite 4-leg co-pilot. No cramming involved or cracking open side doors. It was a feature so smart you wondered why every SUV didn't have it. But climbing in the backseat, you'll find real surprises. Cup holders, rear climate controls, even seats that folded flat to reveal hidden storage compartments. Perfect for gear, tools, or whatever you didn't want rolling around. What about the engine? Well, power came from Ford's trusty 4-liter V6, 205 horsepower sent through a smooth 5-speed automatic. It wasn't trying to win drag races, it was trying to last. And it sure did. But what made this version even more interesting? The suspension. It was firmer than the standard Explorer, and tuned perfectly for comfort. The Sport Trac checked so many boxes you thought it was a surefire success. Even the base price at $23,000 was a fair ask for that kind of versatility. But here's the twist. People didn't quite know what to do with it, and sales just didn't match Ford's expectations. SUV folks didn't want the bed, and truck buyers didn't want the SUV cabin. It was a middle ground no one was asking for at the time. It also had another key issue. You see, the wheelbase was just too long. Great for highway cruising, but not for breakover angles. If you wanted serious off-roading, a regular Explorer made more sense. But if you wanted towing, a proper pickup beat it. And if you wanted both, most folks just didn't know where this fit in. But Ford didn't just give up just yet. The first generation Sport Trac would pave the way for a second generation which was miles better. This refined version came with something earlier models never had, a V8. Not just any V8 either, a 4.6-liter powerhouse with nearly 300 horses. This was rare in a mid-sized truck and even muscular enough to command respect today. But the engine wasn't the only thing that made it special. Ford had big dreams for this edition they called the Adrenaline. Originally, it was going to be a true performance monster, which had a supercharged engine. But then came 2008, and it was time for the whole industry to buckle up. The economy collapsed, and priorities shifted. So Ford pulled the plug on the supercharged dream, and the Adrenaline became just an appearance package. Still, it looked the part. Blacked out headlights, 20-inch chrome wheels, and a menacing grille. But appearances were only half the story. Open the rear doors and you'll find something unexpected. A surprisingly spacious back seat. Not cramped, not an afterthought. A real place for real passengers. Because of this, the Sport Trac wasn't just a dad's toy. It was a practical family hauler. A true garage-friendly solution in a time before every truck looked like a military-grade transport. But it didn't stop there. Pop the tailgate and you'll find a truck bed that came with a cover and a little secret. Lift it up and there's an emergency release inside. That's how versatile this thing was. And if the bed felt too short, Ford gave you a flip-out extender to give you more space for lumber, bikes, or a weekend's worth of mulch. But perhaps the most clever feature was hiding in plain sight. This Sport Trac had a keypad on the driver's door. No need to carry your keys when you went fishing or hiking. All you had to do was punch in a code and you're back on the road. Inside, it wasn't a luxury, but it did have one thing: character. Power pedals, a sunroof, even a rear window that slid down at the push of a button. Even Bluetooth in 2008. Still, not everything aged well. The interior plastics were cheap and the dashboard was pretty dull. But Ford was changing. While this interior might feel like a step behind, the engineering underneath was a step forward. And when you drove it, you could feel that change. The ride was smoother than any mid-2000s pickup, and the new V8 was satisfying for sure. The Explorer Sport Trac didn't try to impress with chrome or horsepower. It tried something harder, to be useful in real life. And maybe, just maybe, it was 20 years too early. Because now everything is chasing the formula it introduced: comfort, utility, and a little character in between. Today, the roads are filled with vehicles trying to do what the Sport Trac did back then. Chevy jumped in with the Avalanche, which featured Chevy's innovative midgate. This was a fold-down wall that let the cabin open up into the truck bed. But if the Avalanche was suburban utility, the Cadillac EXT was its stylish older cousin: leather, chrome, and prestige. But then Honda took a different route in 2005. When the Ridgeline arrived, it didn't try to look like a traditional pickup. Instead, it was built on a unibody SUV platform. This offered car-like handling and featured clever innovations like a dual-action tailgate and a lockable in-bed trunk. Over time, buyers realized it was one of the most practical trucks on the market. So yeah, the Sport Trac was never a runaway sales hit, but it did plant the flag in unexplored territory. It dared to blend two worlds: the comfort of an SUV with the usefulness of a truck. So in our opinion, the Sport Trac wasn't a failure. It was just early. And sometimes the first one through the wall doesn't get the glory, but they paved the way for everyone else. Chevy's design labs have never been afraid to break the rules. From the brute force of the 454 SS to the radical Corvette C8, they've had their fair share of unhinged experiments. But in the early 2000s, something even stranger rolled out. Chevy quietly dropped one of the most bizarre vehicles ever made: a convertible retro-styled pickup truck. This is the story of the Chevy SSR, one of the weirdest, most impractical performance trucks ever made. But to understand what made the SSR so special, we need to go back to 1999. That's when Wayne Cherry, GM's head of design, had this crazy idea rattling around his head. You see those gorgeous pickup trucks from the 50s that hot rodders love so much? Why don't we build a modern version? But not just any revamp. One that could actually compete with sports cars. And the crazy thing is, Cherry actually got the green light to design it. But Cherry didn't just want to be inspired by 50s pickups. His team studied every curve, every line of classic hot rods, until finally they sketched something crazy. But there was just one problem. They had to move fast, because the team had just 3 months to design and build a fully functional concept car for the biggest auto show in America. The pressure was insane, but the team managed to get it done. And when the day finally arrived, it didn't just turn heads, it stole the entire show. GM CEO agreed to build it for real, and the dream was becoming a reality. But dreams and reality, well, they don't always play nice together. Building this thing safely and affordably was a different story altogether, so the team went back to the drawing board, literally redesigning the entire body. But Chevrolet knew the SSR was a gamble. So what did they do? They pulled out all the stops to make sure it got noticed. They hired movie director Michael Bay to create a high-energy commercial that debuted on New Year's Eve in 2003. But the marketing didn't stop there. Chevrolet also secured a spot for the SSR as the official pace car for the 2003 Indianapolis 500. This ensured that millions of racing fans would see the truck in action. And when the first production SSR rolled off the line in 2003, everyone was shocked. This pickup handled better than any pickup had a right to, and it turned heads everywhere you went. It was a time machine with nostalgia and performance in one. But this wasn't just another pretty convertible designed to cruise mall parking lots on Sundays, because Chevrolet blessed it with a 5.3-liter V8, pumping 300 horsepower. This was a truck that could corner like it meant business. And while traditional pickups wallowed through turns like drunken elephants, the SSR carved corners with surgical precision. So when you press the accelerator, this bad boy could hit 60 miles per hour in 7.9 seconds while looking absolutely spectacular doing it. And when you step inside, you're almost transported to an alternate universe. Twin power buckets cradle you in brushed aluminum, while chrome ring gauges stare back at you like the eyes of a friendly robot. This was a cabin built for someone who understands that driving isn't just about getting from point A to point B. But the real magic happens when the roof performs its disappearing act. Two roof sections fold with mechanical precision into a vertical storage bay so compact, so brilliantly engineered, that it seems to defy the laws of physics. So in 30 seconds, your funky pickup truck becomes an open-air custom cruiser that turns every journey into a parade and every parking lot into a car show. But here's what nobody tells you about building that retractable hardtop. It was basically automotive rocket science. The engineers had to solve problems that didn't even have names yet.
So when this folds away, it goes in there. So you lose that much of the load bed.
But they managed to pull it off. They made a truck that could transform from work vehicle to weekend warrior with the push of a button. But here's where the story takes a bittersweet turn. The SSR's cargo bed, while beautifully crafted and perfectly integrated, was more suited to golf bags than actual work.
Anything deeper than that won't go in. I mean, literally won't go in.
It wasn't really a truck for hauling construction materials, so no one quite knew what to do with it. If you want to open the bed, that's not a simple flap. No, it's a multi-step ritual involving electrical switches and insulator knobs.
Chevrolet decided, no, we need to put a lid on it that's operated electrically. So I've got to switch the car on and open it. Bear with. Then there's a button here, hidden inside the dash. There!
But the SSR had another major problem. The price. At $41,000, around $58,000 in today's money, it was a hard sell for something that looked wild but drove mild. Because of this, sales started to slow and stayed slow. In 2003, they only sold 1,664 of them. Because sure, the SSR turned heads, but it didn't turn on the thrill. But Chevy did listen. They listened to the gearheads and the old school men who knew what a real muscle machine should feel like. So they went back to the drawing board and came back with another crazy idea. In 2005, Chevy dropped in a 6-liter LS2 V8 from a Corvette, pushing out a fierce 400 horsepower. They also gave it a proper 6-speed manual. Now, the SSR isn't just a head turner, it's a heart thumper. But by 2006, the fun was over. GM pulled the plug after selling just 24,000 SSRs to the public. Unfortunately, the damage was done, and the world had moved on.
2-seater, hardtop convertible sports pickup truck that Chevrolet decided everybody in the world needed. And everybody in the world said, no, we really don't.
But here's the thing about the SSR. It represented something special. It showed that even a giant corporation like GM could take risks, could build something just because it was cool, not because it could sell 1 million units. Today, those SSRs are actually becoming genuine collector's items. Values are climbing, and more people are discovering what those original buyers knew all along.
I am one of the very, very few people who've always liked them. It's got a sense of humor.
Forget the mainstream buyers. Car enthusiasts and hot rod builders were quietly falling in love with its bizarre charm. These were the guys who understood one thing. Sometimes the best vehicles are the ones that make absolutely no practical sense. Basically, they found their automotive soulmate in the most unlikely package. But the SSR actually taught us something important in the car business. Being right isn't always enough. Sometimes timing is everything. But for those brief 3 years, Chevrolet built the coolest pickup truck America had ever seen.
That's cool.
It's the This is the Pontiac. What's it? No, it's not. It's a Chevrolet SSR.
That rocks.
Okay, now this is a pickup truck.
Yes.
Which has got a roof like a Mercedes SLK that kind of folds away.
It's cool.
You'd drive that, would you?
Yes.
You live in Gloucestershire.
I do.
And you drive around in a purple convertible pickup truck.
Not a purple one, obviously. But
No,
yeah, I
there
think
we
that's
go.
good.
I'm sorry, that's a no.
So what do you think? Was the SSR ahead of its time or just too expensive for its own good? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, hit that subscribe button. We've got plenty more where this came from. In 2002, Lincoln released a pickup that was supposed to revolutionize the truck market. The Lincoln Blackwood had everything: utility, luxury, and advanced features. But instead of becoming the future of luxury trucks, it became a commercial disaster, becoming the rarest Lincoln ever made. But here's what's crazy. Every luxury truck you see today, from the Raptor R to the TRX, follows the exact template this failed truck created. So how did Lincoln accidentally predict the future while simultaneously destroying their own success? To answer this, we need to go back to 1999, when Lincoln was riding the highest wave of success in decades. Their Navigator SUV had done the impossible. Not only did it become Lincoln's second best-selling model, but it actually helped Lincoln overtake Cadillac in sales for the first time ever. But here's the thing about success: it makes you hungry for more. And Lincoln decided to make one of the boldest moves ever. They wanted to build something the automotive world had never seen before. A truck that would combine F-150 utility with town car luxury. This was an insane idea, but the response? Nearly universal approval. Everyone wanted it. But you have to understand the context here. By 2000, pickups were transforming from work vehicles into family vehicles. Ford had just launched the Super Crew, prioritizing comfort over pure utility. The timing seemed perfect, right? Lincoln had the momentum, they had the platform, and they had public demand. What could possibly go wrong? Well, here's the thing. Sometimes being first means you're the one who discovers all the ways things can go catastrophically totally wrong. When the curtain finally lifted, it wasn't what most people expected. Completely black exterior, no other color options. Some critics weren't so kind, saying it resembled the preferred vehicle of a funeral director. But beneath that somber exterior was something no one saw coming. The cargo bed featured genuine dark wenchwood trim, giving it the appearance of fine furniture rather than a work truck. This was unlike anything anyone put on a pickup truck. And then you open the door. Remember, this is 2002. Most truck interiors were vinyl bench seats and plastic dashboards. The Blackwood, though, had 4 individual bucket seats wrapped in the same leather used in Rolls-Royce vehicles. The technology was equally mind-blowing for its time. A standard navigation system when most people had never seen GPS, climate-controlled seats, and real dark oak wood trim throughout the cabin. Lincoln had essentially taken the interior of a town car and somehow made it work in a pickup truck. But the real innovation was still hidden in the back, because Lincoln wasn't just building a luxury truck, they were reimagining what a truck could be. But the stakes couldn't be any higher. This cargo bed would either make this vehicle legendary or destroy everything they'd worked for. Why? Because the Blackwood didn't have a pickup bed. Instead, Lincoln created something that had never existed before. A fully enclosed, carpeted cargo area that looked more like a trunk of a luxury sedan. It even had LED lights that automatically turned on when you opened it. But here's where it gets truly wild. Lincoln didn't just put a cover on it. They created a power-operated cover that you could control from inside the cabin or even from your key fob while walking toward the truck. And the access? Forget the traditional drop-down tailgate. Lincoln installed split Dutch doors that open outward like barn doors, making it easier to load your cargo. The engineering was incredible. The materials were premium, and the technology was years ahead of its time. Lincoln had created the world's first luxury truck storage system. But there was just one tiny problem with this. You couldn't throw a couch in there. You couldn't load lumber. Basically, you couldn't do any of the 1,000 things that people actually buy pickup trucks to do.
Planks of wood or bags of cement. I mean, that's just not going to happen. I mean,
Lincoln had created the world's most luxurious, impractical truck bed in history. But maybe, just maybe, Lincoln could overcome the cargo bed controversy with sheer performance. After all, if you're going to build a luxury truck that can't haul cargo, it better be able to haul everything else. And on paper, the Blackwood did look promising. Lincoln installed a sophisticated 5.4-liter V8, the same power plant that was making the Navigator a success. Premium power for a premium truck, and the numbers seemed respectable enough. 0 to 60 in 9.2 seconds, which wasn't blazing fast but was adequate for a luxury vehicle. It could tow 8,700 pounds, which was more than enough for a boat or travel trailer. Lincoln even went the extra mile with the suspension. They added air springs to smooth out the ride and make it feel more like a luxury sedan than a work truck. But here's where Lincoln made another mistake that would come back to haunt them. In an era where four-wheel drive was becoming expected on premium trucks, Lincoln offered the Blackwood with rear-wheel drive only. So now you had a luxury truck that couldn't go off-road and could barely reach highway speeds. And then, finally, reality hit Lincoln like a freight train. Remember all that enthusiasm we spoke about before? Well, when the production model finally rolled into dealerships in 2002, something had gone terribly wrong. In its entire production run, Lincoln sold only 3,383 Blackwoods. To put that into perspective, Ford was selling more F-150s than that every single week. The Blackwood had become the rarest and shortest produced Lincoln model in the company's entire history. Lincoln had no choice but to pull the plug. But here's the thing that really stings. This wasn't supposed to happen. But the big problem is Lincoln wasn't alone. Cadillac launched their Escalade EXT in the same year as the Blackwood with a similar concept. But they made one crucial difference. They understood that luxury truck buyers still needed their trucks to work like trucks. So the EXT had a real truck bed and offered all-wheel drive as an option. And most importantly, it was cheaper than the Blackwood. Because let's be frank about the Blackwood. It cost nearly $95,000 in today's money for a pickup truck that couldn't go off-road and came only in one color. Lincoln had created a vehicle that was too luxurious for truck buyers and too truck-like for luxury buyers. They'd found the exact spot in the market where nobody wanted to be. But the story of the Blackwood does take an unexpected turn, because sometimes the biggest failures create the most lasting legacies. 20 years later, something remarkable happened. Walk through any luxury truck lot today and you'll see the Blackwood's DNA everywhere. Lincoln had been right about one thing. There was a massive demand for luxury pickup trucks. They just arrived about 15 years too early. The irony was almost poetic. While Lincoln was perfecting carpeted cargo beds, the market was learning to want exactly what they were offering. Those 3,000 Blackwoods that nobody wanted, they're now selling at auction for up to $45,000. Now, Lincoln would try again in 2006 with the Mark LT. This was a more conventional luxury truck that sold better. But the problem is, by then the competition had already learned from the Blackwood's mistakes. They offered luxury without sacrificing utility. The student had become the teacher. Today though, the Blackwood occupies a unique place in automotive history. It's the truck that failed so spectacularly that it taught everyone else how to succeed. It's a reminder that sometimes being first isn't about winning. It's about showing others the way forward. The Lincoln Blackwood was the truck that was too early to succeed, but just early enough to matter.